Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Extra Shift. I'm Chris, and I'm here as always with Brendan. How are we doing?
Pretty good. It's been a little while since we've seen each other. Unfortunately, it isn't intentional. Life gets in the way sometimes, but we're back. We're still talking about hockey, and we're here with episode 218.
Yeah, so we were going to record. Obviously, Brendan was overseas, and I've been working and busy, and he's been working and busy, and it's literally just been really hard to find time to marry it up. But we are back.
It's been a tricky season, I think.
I mean, look,
sometimes it happens.
We didn't miss anything. Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened.
Yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we missed in hopefully a more practical way. Like, we're definitely not going to run through like the 200 trades that have happened since we last recorded.
I've been cramming.
But we'll talk about the important ones and how things are faring and stuff. I think honestly, in a way, it may be a more interesting and useful kind of viewpoint to kind of talk about some of the trades a little bit after they've happened, in terms of like how things are working out, versus at the time going like, this is going to make this team a juggernaut, and then like 3 weeks later it's like, no, it didn't.
I actually kind of like the fact that we didn't jump on and immediately do a trade breakdown, and because I thought about it, we did actually contemplate it, and it was in the works especially when some of the big sort of name moves happened. And like the Marchand one in particular, there was nearly a jump on there, but I'm kind of glad we didn't, and I'm kind of glad we let it play out first, because everything has changed and nothing has changed all at the same time.
I think the older we get, the more we feel like that. But
it really does. So let's get into it. So obviously, 218. We have done 218 of these. So obviously, going through, we go back through the number 18, obviously, and we always look for the interesting people. We look to see if there's anyone absolutely fascinating on this list. In terms of fascinating people, I mean, there's Sharks legend Philip Bysat.
Yeah, of course.
Current Sharks legend Philip Bysat, it must be said. There's also people with like names that are close. I mean, first of all, scoring legend David Clarkson, fan favorite in Toronto. His one season in Columbus was wearing this. My other one is a name that sounds like it should be something better, but it's not. Zdeno Giga. And it sounds like there should be two really good players in there, and they just sort of combined to make somebody who played for two teams in 2002.
Yeah, there's not a bunch of huge names. Obviously, the smooth Rob Thomas is on there, but Jesse Puljujarvi is played as 18 in Pittsburgh. Although you could argue that he didn't really, because I don't know what he did wrong, but he just could not get a game and ended up terminating his contract during the time since we last talked. I don't know if this is it league for Jesse.
I think it probably is, unfortunately.
It probably is.
More of it. Look, my other favorite one here is and people who played the NHL games all the way through the early 2000s into the early 2010s. Adam Hall, who was an ever present on any roster that you had in any of those games. For some reason, it didn't matter what team you actually played as, if it was a team that featured Adam Hall or not. It felt like you had Adam Hall. I seem to remember every roster that I never played with, for example, in 2009, 11, 12, and 13, he was with Tampa. I never played with Tampa. It always felt like I had Adam Hall. I just ended up with him at some point. It was almost like it was a league requirement.
just gravitated towards the roster. Obviously, Denny Savard, Serge Savard, Hall of Famers on there. Big.
We're not sort of talking about the Savards, everybody. And the real deal, James Neal.
Oh yes, of course, yes.
You know, again, who had an amazing run and then managed to parlay that into several crap years. That's one of my favorite things about James Neal.
One of I think the original Vegas team, right?
Yeah, and didn't he get the first goal?
Oh, maybe.
I'm pretty sure James Neal got the first
he
goal.
had like a hot streak for like a few weeks.
Yeah, that was it. That was the last of his hot streaks.
Yeah,
and then he did the run. He went from Vegas to Calgary, and that was the James Neal Calgary trade where everyone could not believe that Calgary had traded for James Neal. That was an interesting trade, that one. And then he ended up in Edmonton, like everybody else at the end of their career, trying to win a cup by hanging around Connor McDavid, which is it's a strategy. It's not one that's working so far.
It hasn't worked so far, but eventually.
And I mean, look, if we wanted to be vaguely serious for half a second, Willie O'Ree in 1958 for Boston. But we don't want to be serious. We'd rather talk about people hanging around Connor McDavid to try to get a cup.
Speaking of cups, though, you know, the most prolific cup winner of recent times, Pat Maroon, is retiring.
Yeah, I never thought I'd see the day, mainly because he's, you know, tough and gritty and wins cups apparently. And
you just staple him onto a fourth line somewhere and don't worry about it.
You know, it's you literally win the cup because of Pat Maroon. No one else. No one else. It's just Pat Maroon. Like those Lightning teams had nothing to do with Kucherov. It had nothing to do with Stamkos.
It was all the toughness of Pat Maroon.
Look, if it wasn't for Pat Maroon treating Toronto quite badly, you know, that's it. It was just they got him
in a row. You know, props to him. You know, if nothing else, you know, retires. You know, in a way that like that record is probably going to last for a long time. I think the last person that won 3 in a row was in like the 50s or something. Like,
I mean, it does very much have the feeling of Mayor Diamond Joe Quimby in The Simpsons. You know, if this is not the way that the winds of change are blowing, let it not be said that I too also do not blow. And he just sort of followed the cup. He chased it for a while. He's like, I've played on some Oilers teams. I deserve better.
Yeah.
And just, you know, somebody who did the opposite of everyone else is trying to go and play with McDavid for a cup and went, nah, I think I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, look, the fact that he ended up in Chicago probably says it all.
It says everything you want to say. Now, I do actually have a stat, by the way, because I know some people, the 3 of you who comment, know that I always have a stat, but I'm going to save the stat until we get a bit further down because the stat relates to something in the news. So I'm going to leave that powder dry, and instead we're going to talk about the other bit of news that was going on, which is Aaron Ekblad. Not everything, of course, is magnificent in Florida. So Ekblad is suspended 20 games for violating the terms of the performance-enhancing substance program.
Kind of came out of nowhere, really. Like, just one morning, it's like Ekblad is suspended. I'm like, oh, okay.
And he's not even like, I failed a drug test, which was a shock, but I took something to help me recover. I accept responsibility. I'll be back. I've learned a hard lesson. My point with a lot of this, though, is that it might well have been, and I'm not saying that he was out there taking anything that was completely, you know, overboard or he was trying to cheat the system. But at this point in time, if you're a professional athlete, you got to know what's going into your body.
Yeah, it's true. Like there's got to be some kind of level of like, you know, for us, you know, it sounds like, you know, like, oh yeah, sure, you know, we could have been prescribed something or took something or whatever, like, you know, accidentally or whatever. There's got to be some stringent, you know, if it was someone who the Panthers hired who gave him something that he didn't realize he was taking, whatever, that's one thing. But, you know, if it's something that he, like, you know, personally got and just didn't bother to check on or whatever, like, yeah, you got to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, you'd feel like it was, you'd feel like you'd probably get that one right. I mean, if I was being paid as much money as they're being paid, I feel like I'd get that right. That's probably the thing I check. It's like, so what am I allowed to eat today? You know, me personally, do I really care? No. If I'm being paid several $1 million to do that, I probably care a bit more.
Yeah.
It probably matters. I'm just saying. So that'll be interesting to see. Obviously, it's not really, let's sort of talk about the standings at the moment, because it's not really hurt the Panthers.
No. I mean, look, they were already in a pretty comfortable position. They weren't, I feel, leaning on Ekblad in a big way in the last few years, regardless. Like, it's kind of gone away from him being the franchise, defenseman kind of guy there to, them having a lot of other options, a lot of other depth and so forth. It's not going to hurt their chances of qualifying. They'll probably qualify for the playoffs in the next, week or so. And they, made a bunch of ads at the deadline that we'll talk about a little bit later anyway.
It kind of feels like the most that this has probably done is hurt Ekblad's next contract ideas.
Yeah.
Like there's we don't need you, and not only do we not need you, but you kind of let us down a bit. So I think he's still got a little bit on that contract, but
I think he's at the end. It looks like he is at the end of his contract. He's a pending UFA.
Oh, is he? I thought he still had a couple of years.
No, 2025 is when it ends. He's in year 8 of 8. That could be interesting. Could be free agent Aaron Ekblad.
I feel like that's him gone. Now, let's talk about the playoff picture, and let's start, of course, in the great city of San Jose. The Sharks are flying. They are magnificent. They are amazing.
They're
out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
But no, look, the Sharks and the Blackhawks are out of the playoffs in the most shocking news ever. There's a couple of others as well, but I'm going to start with the Sharks because let's face it, I'm not going to get much of a chance to talk about them in this episode.
Yeah.
This is the happiest losing season I've ever had. I do not remember a happier losing season than this one for any of my sporting teams ever. Because, we're 47 points, we're minus 77 goal difference. And I have enjoyed every last bit of this damn thing because the Sharks have continued to build. They've continued to blood the young players through, but not overexpose them to the point where they're crushed. You don't get the feeling that Macklin Celebrini is struggling with, the idea of they're losing every night and those sorts of things. You get the idea that, he's on pace to record somewhere in the mid-70s in terms of points in his rookie season and is going to probably end up, much like Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby, not winning the Calder because his team is not playing meaningful hockey. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the thing because, he's outscoring everybody, but you're going to end up with either a goalie who's probably going to make it into the playoffs or, another player is going to make it into the playoffs. We'll talk about them in a minute. But those two are going to get the Calder votes because they're playing meaningful hockey. But Celebrini has been as advertised. And the other one that's been really interesting for me is Will Smith has woken up. And those two are really starting to look the business. So I had no problems with what the Sharks did at the deadline. I know there were a lot of people like, but who are they going to play? And it's like, nobody. That's the point.
Doesn't matter.
It's the clearest tank you've ever seen with somebody who's already also got a couple of really decent young players. And, look, this is all, in my mind, this is all going towards Matthew Schaefer. And this whole thing is the Sharks want Schaefer because they don't want another center. They don't need another center. What they would like is a lovely left-handed defenseman. And I feel like that's where the Sharks are sort of tailoring this season to. So I'm happy with this losing season. Let's keep going, boys. Let's dig. Let's absolutely dig.
Keep digging up, stupid.
No digging up. Down all the way.
Meanwhile, the Penguins are digging up. They immediately fell entirely out of the playoff picture, and then after selling off at the deadline, started winning like 5 out of 6 games. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like,
they're an outside shot. They're an outside shot. They're not going to make it, but they are an outside shot.
There's no way they're going to make it. But obviously there's, it's pretty flat, but like realistically it's not going to happen. But it would be just like them. Yeah, I know, but it would be just like them to like have like a 10-game winning streak and miss it out by 1 point again.
Yeah, look, the Blue Jackets are probably actually in, and I never thought I'd say this, especially not with the way their year's gone so far. The Blue Jackets are probably in with the best shout at the moment of nabbing
of the Metro teams,
another Metro spot. Because Like they've got the same number of games as the Islanders, but you just feel like the Blue Jackets are just sort of doing weird things, right? Like they're 2-7-1. They've been on a bit of a downturn.
Yeah,
But
they
you
were
just
they
kind of
were a lot better chance. Like they were looking like they were going to take that spot. I suspect that no Metro team will be in a wild card spot by the end of the season. But they all kind of looked like they could have at some point in time.
they're
But
helping
then
my
the rest of
Rangers.
the time they were complete shit.
They're helping my Rangers prediction come true, which is great.
Yeah,
Because my God, they've been terrible.
yeah,
They've been utterly horrific. And obviously, let's talk about the Atlantic because it's the only division in hockey apparently. So the only division in hockey is, as everyone predicted, a 3-horse race between the Maple Leafs, the Panthers, and the Lightning. That is kind of what we actually said at the start of the season. Both of us said that.
Yeah.
I am super happy that my Boston are going to suck prediction has been so accurate that the Sharks kicked them up and down the ice the other night.
Yeah, they are fucking terrible.
They are an atrocious team, and they tried to tank way too late.
It's bizarre because it's really like it's looked like they've should have fallen off the last couple of years, and then they would just like win the President's Trophy, and then finally it was just like, all right, I guess I don't know anything about hockey, and then they're like, oh no, actually we're bad. It's like like some witch's like deal or something. Ran off.
I stuck true. I do not and have never believed in the Boston Bruins, and I certainly didn't believe in these Boston Bruins.
I didn't previously either, and they kept proving me wrong. And then I'm like, all right, I guess.
Yeah, but that's not the year that I predicted that the Oilers had missed the playoffs because I said McDavid would get injured, and you went and he got injured, and they missed the playoffs.
You brought that evil on him.
I brought that evil. Look, I will take that evil because I also brought the Bruins on everybody. So you're welcome. But who knew that trading one of your 2 goalies who were keeping you afloat was the start of the madness?
Yeah.
And it really was, especially, and we've talked about this a few times, trading one of the goalies without locking the other one down. Like, just stupid moves. And I am wondering if, I know for a fact there are lots of people in Boston right now who are questioning exactly how much Sweeney knows about hockey. It's quite a common trend at the moment. Sports radio
for me. Yeah. Sorry, go.
Sports radio for the Bruins right now is amazing.
I think what's fascinating for me about the wild card race in the Atlantic is that for years people have been saying like, this is the year for Ottawa, this is the year for Montreal, this is the year that we're finally gonna, we're gonna become a playoff team or whatever. And it's basically almost guaranteed to happen, at least for one of them, probably for both, just because everyone in the Metro just entirely dropped out. Like, it's basically like it's not that they got any better. In fact, they're probably worse than they were previously, but also so is everyone else.
Everybody in the Metro just stopped playing hockey, except we'll come to them in a minute. I do want to mention, because if we don't, every time we mention them, people listen, people click, and people comment. Toronto talking about the massive crisis of how bad they are, but while winning the Atlantic is amazing. And to be honest, I do actually think that this iteration of the Leafs, in terms of, they went out, they got Berube, all those question marks around, are they going to be built for the playoffs this year? They've gone out, they've traded really well, they've got really good depth, and I'm here to tell you they are not built for the playoffs in any way, shape, or form, and they are going to get kicked up the ice in the first round.
Pretty much.
I don't know what to tell you. It's really funny. Now, having said that, and now knowing they are playing terribly, watch them wake up in the playoffs. But they have been the most lackluster version of a Maple Leafs team I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it definitely hasn't been exciting. It's been an incredibly down Austin Matthews year, in terms of goal scoring and everything. Watch him suddenly turn up and score 4 every game in the playoffs or whatever. But in terms of he had like a 70 goal pace or something last year, and he's got something 30 something or whatever at the moment.
As the person, as you well know, as a person who owns him in fantasy this year, it's not a great year to have him.
No.
He carried me. Every year I've come close to the playoffs and made the playoffs. Yeah. I was on the back of Matthews, and
everyone has a down year sooner or later.
This has been been a very down year. And I just, I think the interesting part about this, regardless of the playoffs, although I said if they win the playoffs, Mitch Marner writes his own contract. But if they don't win, and especially on the back of that Matthews season, what does a Marner deal look? That's going to be so interesting.
Yeah.
Like, because Marner can basically almost write a check at this point and say, "Hi, put my name on that, please."
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about our two sets of overlords, shall we? We all saw this coming.
Yeah, of course.
So the Jets and the Caps.
Everyone picked these two teams, definitely.
Our overlords.
If I look back, I probably had both of them out of the playoff picture. But look, props to the Caps, honestly. Do you remember when, like, a few years back, the Rangers put out that thing in the paper where they said, like, we're going to be rebuilding, we're going to be bad for a while. Then they made like a handful of moves, and then they were immediately good,
instantly brilliant.
I feel like that's kind of what the Caps have done. Like, they in a big way, like, they have hit that, like, New York Rangers trajectory of having just like a few miserable years while still keeping, like, their franchise guys. Had a couple of, like, convenient turns for them where they were able to have, like, a couple of big money contracts expire or get a cocaine habit or whatever they had to do to get them off the books. And they, have been able to make a bunch of smart moves and, replace those guys, fill them out with, like, young players, like Alexei Protas and so forth, who've, like, stepped into their top six this year and come out of nowhere. And, it's impressive, honestly. They're a legitimately good team. Like, even with Ovi hurt for a couple of weeks, which, we'll talk about at the end, he probably, if he wasn't injured for, like, those 3 weeks or whatever, probably has already broken the scoring, the Gretzky's record by now. But they just kept rolling. Like, they've pretty much just been a winning team straight, consistently the entire year.
What's been interesting for me is that on one hand, they haven't needed Ovi to do it. Like, he's been brilliant, but they haven't needed him to do it.
They would still playoff team without him.
But on the other hand, what Carberry's successfully done is he's managed to build a team around an aging Ovi rather than like, oh, we're carrying Ovi to the record and that's our purpose, which everyone thought, including us, we talked about.
Well, I totally thought it was going to be just pass it to Ovi this year, which they're still doing, but they're also
rather than do that in a really cynical way, what they've actually done, which has been quite successful, is they haven't carried Ovi, they've built around him and gone, no, you're a meaningful goal scorer on a meaningful team, and you are a key part of what we do. And we're going to exploit the fact that you are the greatest pure goal scorer of the era, and you're just going to bang him in for us. We will do all the heavy lifting. You'll score, and then we will just play really well, and we'll go out there and we'll win. And that's what they've done. It's almost simple. This idea of you've got a really good superstar and you build around them and you go out and win. The Oilers and the Leafs should probably pay attention right now because, like, this is apparently all you need to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, you look at their roster top to bottom, and it doesn't look like an all-star team or anything.
No,
but
it's just solid.
They've just managed to, there's no liabilities there. They've just managed to build out a solid team.
They haven't built an A line that is so expensive that they've got to have like a fourth line that is made up of absolute spare parts and players that are completely creator player.
Yeah.
And that's something that a couple of teams do is they have these superstar lines, and on their fourth line is guy you've never heard of, or NCAA prospect that you've just convinced yourself is the greatest player alive. Don't know who I'm talking about there, Leafs. Anyway, more importantly, also let's go over and talk about our overlords in the West, the Jets.
Yeah.
Who, again, I look stupid because I said they're going to suck, they're going to be terrible, and nope, they've been good the whole damn year. They've been good.
Yeah. I mean, like I think the first few weeks when they were kind of winning, we're just like, all right, we'll see.
Wait till the fighting starts.
But look, I again, a roster that top to bottom, there's a bunch of guys in there that just kind of go, all right, I guess. But look, they've pieced it together in a way that has worked out for them.
I mean, the Stars have avoided a fall off, which has been good for them.
I mean, look, it helps. Like, Connor Hellebuck is going to run away with the with the Vesna.
You can give him the award now. We don't have to. We don't have to.
There's no competition. There is no one else that is even vaguely in that ballpark.
No.
With the way that he's played. Like basically, I think the Jets have averaged with I don't even know if it's just with Hellebuck. It might also be with Comrie in there, but like below 2 goals a game for the entire season, and it is essentially never gone really very far from that. Like all they have to do is score 3 goals and they win every single night. That is essentially guaranteed. Write a check for success.
Like they've got easily the lowest number of goals conceded in the league. It's sensational. Like what they've done is absolutely sensational. Pacific, obviously, the Golden Knights and the Kings have sort of left out, but the Golden Knights in particular have left out, which I sort of thought they might. The Kings have been really good lately, especially. Like they're on a 9-1 run. The Oilers are going to be really interesting because the Oilers, while they're still sitting in third and they've got a gap on the Flames, Draisaitl, McDavid are probably still a week away.
Yeah, they've said that neither of them are going to play any of the 3 games this week. There's no guarantee necessarily that they'll play after that. Obviously, they'll be back for the playoffs, even if they've both got 1 leg each. Yeah. But the reality is, they're going to be scraping in. They've got 10 games left to go. Do those 2 play 3 of them, 4 of them, 5 of them? We just don't know.
I don't know how many more they're going to play. I mean, it probably depends on how sewn up they think the heart is. I think if they think that Draisaitl's got the heart sewn up, then he probably doesn't play. If they think he needs to do something, they might put him out there.
I think at least one of them will be back next week, but whether it's both is another question.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So let's talk about the deadline. And now, when we get to the deadline, I'm going to talk trivia. So my trivia today for episode 218, I've gone really, 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 really obscure, and you won't get this, and you'll actually be really shitty that I've asked you. One of the players traded weighs 218 pounds. They've also scored quite well. They've actually scored the 2nd most points since being traded.
Oh, so this is all right. Someone is 218 pounds. All right, that's pretty hefty. I mean, but they're all big boys. It's hard. Like Conor Sherry's not on this list, so I'm not kind of sure exactly who to. But is it Marty Necas? I think he's actually got
Marty Necas has 22 points in 21.
I think he's actually got the most.
However, JT Miller has 20. It is JT Miller. It is JT Miller returning back to familiar grounds.
I made this list of points and I didn't want to read it and cheat. I'm looking over this side and trying to remember who did well.
I'm pleased you didn't. Yeah, no, look, the most obvious trade of the season when it finally happened.
Yeah, that's it.
And
it's like,
annoyingly, really annoyingly, it's worked.
Yeah.
JT Miller's been really damn good for the Rangers. Someone has to be.
I mean, look, that isn't that the story of JT Miller, really? Like, he'll be good for about a season and a half, and then someone decides that it's all terrible and he has to.
It's what happened in New York the first time.
Yeah.
It was like, JT Miller's playing really well. JT Miller's really great. The stories come out. The locker room's a bit toxic. We don't quite know what's going on here. Next thing you know, JT Miller has moved.
He's
Vancouver.
Off. He went to Tampa, and then he went to Vancouver, and then he went to...
It's going really well in Vancouver. It's going really well in Vancouver. Everything's great in Vancouver. It's a bit toxic in the locker room. JT Miller has moved. It just feels like there's a pattern. At some point, you're going to realize it's you. And, I mean, I don't know if JT's ever actually going to bother with that, but at some point, JT is going to go, oh, I'm the problem. Actually, no, it's JT Miller. He'll never do that. Look, he's been good, but someone needs to be good for the Rangers because Maroon, they're not good.
Yeah, it's been a tough season for them for sure. It's obviously a lot of things have gone into that. It certainly hasn't been the Vezina Shesterkin season that I predicted at the start of the year, and that's certainly not going to happen at this point in time. they could, in theory, go on a hot run in the next 10 games and get into the playoffs still. Do I expect that will happen? No, probably not.
I don't look. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that's not going to happen. I'm really interested, by the way. So the top two scorers since these trades, in terms of like players who moved, Marty Netjes and JT Miller. Probably the two most high profile, obviously alongside the Rantanen part of the Netjes trade. But when I nearly jumped on, and I was messaging you at the time before I nearly jumped on to talk about the Rantanen deal, I thought that Marty was a good pickup for Colorado. I thought that looked like a really good move.
Yeah, I mean, considering, like, to roll back the clock a little bit, obviously, considering that they realized that they weren't going to get a Rantanen extension done, there wasn't going to be, any future there, and they wanted to move on from him while they could get value for it. I think they did very well to get, someone of Marty Netjes's, caliber, considering, like, he was having a good season in Carolina before the trade. So, he was traded while on a high and has pretty much just kept it up and been, consistently good this year. Like, he's had a big jump from previously. I don't know whether this is going to last long term for his career. I don't know if he's a point per game player going ahead necessarily, but all indications this year, that's a pretty decent kind of piece for them in a package that they got back for a guy that they couldn't extend.
That whole, I look forward to the eventual athletic long form on what happened with Mikko Rantanen this year.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's going to be a long form. Someone's going to write a long form. I don't know who's going to be.
I mean, I don't know that I feel like he probably wanted to test the market. Like, I suspect that, he had it in his head, like, I want to see what's out there. I want to get to free agency and see what my suitors are. I have a few teams that I would like to go to, and I want to see what they want to offer for me. But obviously, at this point in time, I'm under contract and I can't do that. I'm not so excited about staying in Colorado or whatever, or at least I can't guarantee. Like, maybe I'll go back to Colorado if that ends up being the best offer that I get.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to guarantee that that's going to be where I end up. But obviously, Colorado's like, well, we can't go into the off season with that as our plan. We need to get something for you while we can. Moved him to Carolina, which, most likely he was like, I don't know if that's where I want to be, but they wanted a swing at trying to convince him of that. Obviously that didn't work. He was there for a little while. I don't think it was probably necessarily anything about that situation or anything. He had, from the sounds of it, certain teams that he wanted to go to, and Carolina wasn't one of them. And I think that Carolina, I'm full props to them. Like, take that swing when you can. Like, it's very difficult to, they tried the same thing with Gensel, and they couldn't get him to stay. They tried it with Rantanen now that, they've taken a swing on a guy with the hope that, like, can we get this superstar to want to stay here and live in, Carolina? And it's fine. They gave it a shot. And I think that they got pretty good value back for flipping him back again. Like, really long-term, they've done fine out of that deal.
I think it confirms good management. And I know it sounds weird to say that when, you take a big swing like that and then bail.
Yeah. Even if you can say that you lost value on it. But
that's the thing. I think that if you have a management team that is prepared to take the swing, acknowledge quickly if it hasn't worked, and take another swing.
Yeah.
I
mean, and to quantify that, obviously they got Logan Stankoven back from Dallas. They ended up still with a young, high profile, high upside forward as part of that deal. They got picks and stuff back. Even if you can say, oh, well, they lost a little bit in the deal. Sometimes you just got to take a swing on that kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's something that a lot of big teams don't do.
Yeah.
And I think too often they won't do it because they're scared of, well, what happens if this doesn't work?
Yeah.
And I like the fact that, and again, I think it goes to things like non-traditional hockey markets to be prepared to do that sort of stuff and think outside the box and make those sorts of moves. That's important, I think. And I think that, full kudos. And look, I'm going to give kudos to both sides because for both sides of that trade to go, yeah, let's do it. Like
Yeah.
that's a lot of guts. That takes a
I
lot
think
of
honestly, like between Carolina, Colorado, and Dallas, they all came out pretty decently from what I can see. Like no one got totally fleeced in this in this exchange.
No, exactly. I think it was. I think when I wrote the notes down for when we were going to record that one, I think the notes I wrote down. I think what I said to you was, it's really an interesting trade when you look at it and go, everyone might have won and everyone might have lost, which means this
Yeah.
feels pretty even.
Yeah, I
And it
mean, like
depends on what you're looking
between
at.
Sankova, Neches, and Rantanen, like you've got three good forwards. Whether or not all of them, in 3 years' time, we look back at this and kind of go, "Well, this guy didn't turn into anything." Then okay, but for now, they all gave it a shot.
Yeah. In terms of other big moves there, I mean, obviously for me, the biggest move was the Jake Wallman to Edmonton. It's not a massive move. Look, he's doing
I will say
fine.
there was a lot of like not every deadline move is a superstar.
But look, the Wallman one was interesting because there was lots of the Sharks going to move Wallman, and then they moved Wallman, and everyone went, "That's it." And it's like, what were you expecting Jake Wallman to fetch in this market?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
he's
look,
not going to be fetching big trade
no,
points.
look, I think he's had a good season in terms of the kind of minutes that he's played. Like he's played a lot of 5-on-5 minutes. He's not on power plays putting up a bunch of points or anything like that. So
He had a serviceable year on one of the worst defenses in the league.
yeah, that's pretty much all you can ask for. And he's gone to Edmonton where he'll continue to try and do a good job on a bad defense.
It's just, yeah. I mean, look, I like Jake, and I like Jake as a player. Wallman as a character is interesting, but I like him as a player. But we were never going to hang on to him for this year. That's not the aim. Again, we've got our eyes on a left-handed defenseman at the end of the season, and you move all the pieces you can to make sure that's going to happen. And also, like for San Jose, they wanted to create a bit more flexibility because they can't retain. Like they have no retention spots left. So if they were going to try to make some moves later on, they probably needed to dump some cap. So because they would need to use a lot of cap.
Yeah, from the perspective of of this deadline, obviously it's not everyone necessarily loading up for a playoff push. It probably tells you all you need to know about like Pittsburgh's season. That I was happy that they accepted that they weren't in the picture and just got a bunch of assets. Like I think that they did pretty well with. They didn't have a heap of super valuable pieces to move. The one that might have gotten them a big return would have been Rickard Rakell, which who also still has like some term, and that could still end up being an off-season kind of thing. It felt like the deadline was maybe a chance for them where they might have been able to swing a big deal and get like a young player and a high-end pick or something like that. But it's not still off the table in the off-season, and I think that they did well around the edges to just anything that wasn't nailed down, anything expendable, and especially players who they'd previously been paid to take on. They got a third to take on Cody Glass earlier in the year. They got a third to move him on. That's good business.
Look, I think that when they talked about winners and losers, and a lot of people are like, all these winning teams that traded. I think teams like San Jose that got rid of assets, got rid of things that they weren't going to hang on to, and were not going to be things that were tradable later on for anything major. That's a win. Like there was that joke that we talked about where last year, where I think it was Wyshynski who suggested that Mike Greer should be general manager of the year because he did the job that he was paid to do by his ownership.
Not everyone's job as a GM is to win the cup every year.
And Mike Greer's job was to build up the best talent pool that a team could have. And he's largely done that. So, I have no problems with those moves there. But again, Dallas have done quite well. Rantanen and Granlund, and I'm happy for Mikkel Granlund. I've said before, Wallman was a decent player on a really bad defense. Mikkel Granlund was great. Really, career revitalization.
Yeah, honestly, he looked totally washed when he was on Pittsburgh. I don't know what happened. He was just completely invisible out there. I don't know if it was just a bad system for him or he was just having a bad year or whatever. But he took the reins and was a big superstar again in San Jose, like actually a kind of legitimate top 6 guy, and for to be able to get flipped to a very good team in Dallas and continue to put up that, like, it seems like he had a little bit of a slower start, but recently he's been coming on again. So big props to him to extend his career.
And I think the other thing too for those teams down at the bottom who like move players on for nothing, I think the other thing you've got to think about is it's how you start getting players to come. It's the idea of you could go to these other teams that are going to be sort of a mid, might be chasing a playoff spot. You might be in a scrap. You could be down the bottom. With us, we're not going to be great. We know we're not going to be great. But if you can be great, we can get you a move to something better. And if we do happen to be great, you can have the option of sticking around. And I think that it's the young players benefit from having those sorts of players around. Like, you can't tell me that, again, Smith and Celebrini and co did not benefit from Mikkel Granlund being around. Like, they all talked about what a great guy he was in the locker room, and you hear that all the time, but I think in his case it's fairly true. And you get those guys in to be that for as long as they happen to be there. On the deal of, if we get towards the deadline and something better comes along for you, we'll move you. Like, we're not gonna hold you ransom here for, like, we're gonna come last, but you're staying for 3 years. No, you can go whenever you damn well want. And then there's players like Tyler Toffoli who just give the impression they just don't want to go. They're quite happy. He seems to like the environment and like the fit, and he's having fun. I've not watched Tyler Toffoli have so much fun on the ice ever as him when he's on the ice with Celebrini. It is so much fun. It's joy. It's joy on the ice.
Just to finish wrapping up about some of the trade deadline guys.
I want to talk Florida.
Yeah.
What did you think of the Seth Jones move?
I mean, look, I think that Seth Jones is a serviceable defenseman still.
I felt like we reimagined how good Seth Jones was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that he's ever going to go back to being kind of the guy that some people thought he was when he got that Chicago contract. Certainly the people who signed that contract thought that he was going to be this, stud, number one defenseman, and with absolutely no competition in Chicago, he lost that job over and over and over again. I don't know that he is going to be, number 1D in Florida anytime soon or anything like that. But, with some salary retention and, and a sheltered role, I think that he'll probably, kind of be able to be a depth guy there for them, a middle of the defensive lineup kind of guy who has some offensive pedigree and so forth. Hopefully, he'll be able to kind of turn that around a little bit in a better system. I think he'll probably be fine there. But if anyone's expecting him to be like, this is the new stud power play quarterback in Florida, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, as I said, I felt like in the media there was a lot of reimagining that Seth Jones was the last great defensive piece that was available for like nothing. And I'm like, no, like, are we forgetting why he was Chicago were pilloried for that contract?
Yeah,
because it feels like we are forgetting why Chicago was absolutely pilloried for that contract.
It feels to me like he is the replacement for when they don't re-sign Aaron Ekblad.
I think that's the backup. Meanwhile, the biggest bit of news hasn't played.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Brad Marchand thing comes out of nowhere. Like, it literally happened in like the last few minutes of the day, like over the deadline, after everyone thought everything was done. It's like, oh, actually, by the way, Brad Marchand, is going to Florida. What? It felt like nobody knew that this was going to happen until after it had happened. And obviously, he still hasn't played for them. He's still hurt, and he'll probably still be hurt like right up until the start of the playoffs. But
it's interesting because all of the news out of there after the situation happened was basically Sweeney talking about wanting to get something done and Brad Marchand going, I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
I had no interest in leaving. And then it just basically came out they were lowballing him and didn't want to pay him. And I kind of, look, I get it on one hand where you're like, we'd like you to take a haircut because it's apparently, remember, that's the Boston way. Everybody takes a haircut. That's what you all do. But I I don't know. Like, what are you saving your money for? I look at Boston and go, where are you spending it? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's interesting because for a pending UFA, it didn't ever feel like Brad Marchand was like on the trading block. As like
no,
the
at no point
captain,
was there whispers.
yeah, as the captain of Boston, it felt like, oh well, he's just going to be there until the wheels fall off. Like, he's not going anywhere. So look, honestly, props to Sweeney for being like, hey, look, we don't have the luxury of sweetheart deals of just keeping you around for this, for the end of the season for no good reason or whatever. We may as well get something for you. But also at the same time, it clearly pissed off a lot of people.
Yeah. I don't know how it's going to look. I just don't know how it's going to look when you finally see Brad Marchand out on the ice in a Panthers jersey. It's going to feel very bizarre. I don't know if we get that return that I think everyone expected. I mean, I think he'll sign a one-day contract when he retires.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we're going to get. I think there were a lot of people who were like, as you said, will go. Oh, he'll go off for the rest of the season, and then he'll come back to Boston and sign a contract.
Yeah, I suspect that they've turned the page with that. That's probably.
I think Brad Marchand is now moving firmly into the screw you. I'm going to win something without you camp.
Yeah. I mean, look, he's also 37. He doesn't have that much longer. Boston is not going to win next year. It doesn't make much sense for him to go back for loyalty when clearly there's no loyalty there.
Besides, everyone's waiting for the ultimate villain arc and for Brad Treliving to pick up the phone and go, "Hey, Brad, want to come to Toronto and play against Boston?" And
they would salivate at that.
That's coming. That is going. I've got this hunch. I've got this hunch he plays his last season in Toronto, just because he's that level troll.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just feel like that's going to be it. So let's get to the old dudes.
Yeah.
Because the old dudes, Sidney Crosby,
still kicking.
Sidney bloody Crosby.
of everyone else who is having a terrible season, I mean, there's a few people having a decent season on Pittsburgh. Sidney Crosby is not one of them. He just keeps on kicking. He is leading the team by a very large margin. Keeping up his point per game pace. He is still, I think, at this point in time on schedule to to keep up his point per game pace every single year of his career. It was looking dicey at one point in time, but he's currently on 79 points in 71 games. The next guy down is Rickard Rakell on 62 points. So that gives you an idea of the gap. Yeah, a bit of a gap.
I think it's safe.
Yeah, I think he's pretty good. He needs 3 more points in the next 10 games to do it. I think he's probably going to be okay. But he in doing that, leads the NHL in points since the Four Nations break. He's had 20 points since then, which he was obviously good in that tournament too. Yeah. And is currently, at least the time of yesterday, I think when I wrote this down, leading the NHL in 5-on-5 points for the season. So because the power play has been pretty shit. But he passed Gretzky for the most points with a single franchise. So he's now 4th on that list behind Gordie Howe, Stevie Y, and Mario Lemieux.
Yeah, I mean, look, the sad part for Sid is that he's 4th, but he's not even going to hold the Penguins record for that one because Mario's still out by a bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's only 53 points though. If he plays one more season, he will get it.
It's catchable, but it depends on what happens. But
I mean, look, it guaranteed that if he plays next year, he could be 2nd.
Yeah, so let's
within spitting distance.
But let's talk about the most important one of all.
Yeah,
Grade 8 watch is happening.
Yeah,
and look,
he had one more today. I had to update these notes today.
Wayne Gretzky is currently traveling around, following the Capitals like a fangirl, staying probably at every Trump resort and casino that he can find. Because his mate Donald will let him in. But just to remind you that the greatest of all time is a douche. But he's following Ovi around so he can be in the building when Ovi breaks the record. He's 6 away.
Yeah, 6 away, so close.
And at the start of the year, remember, one of the 3 predictions was Alexander Ovechkin will break the record.
I mean, look, and pace-wise, he's on a nuts pace. Like, he's scoring like 0.6 goals a game or something like that, I think is roughly kind of what it's at. Well, so, he's actually at like one of the highest goal scoring paces of his career this year. He's not squeezing it. Like, yeah, the last couple of years we've been talking about, like, is it going to be sad? Is it going to be, trickling it in? Look, there's been some empty net goals, but it hasn't been like, he's desperately getting 20 goals a season trying to get there. This is going to be a pretty significant record for him, just in terms of like his overall. He'll be in the goal scoring race while doing it. So pretty impressive. The really disappointing thing is how many games that he missed. That he absolutely would have done it already.
He'd have it by now.
Yeah, he would have it by now already. So he's got 36 goals in 55 games this season. And given the fact that the Capitals have played 71 games, that gives you an idea that easily would have surpassed it by now if he'd played every game. So he's got 11 more games to get 6 more goals, which pace wise he will probably do it in the last game of the season.
I mean, if you look at who they're playing in those last games,
yeah.
The Wild is next, but then the Sabres and the Bruins back to back. That's tantalizing.
He could, I mean, look, if he gets a hat trick in one of those games,
he's got the Blackhawks as well on the schedule.
Yeah, like he could very easily score, 6 in a game on one of these teams.
He could score. I reckon he'll get 1 against the Wild.
Yeah.
2 against the Sabres.
Yeah.
2 against the Bruins, which then means it's either the Hurricanes, and if not the Hurricanes, the Blackhawks.
Imagine it comes down to the if you're...
who the last game of the season is?
What's that?
Penguins.
Of course it is. So if you're Tristan Jarry and you're in net for the Penguins on the last game of the season in a game that means nothing, and you know that you can be the goalie of record to let in the one goal that breaks the record for Ovi and be on every highlight reel for the rest of time, do you just let it go?
I kind of feel like you let it trickle through. There was a great article. To give you an idea, there is an article on The Athletic right now, which was written by Chris Johnston, which is basically saying the NHL is desperately hoping that the Ovi goal is not a disputed goal that has to go to replay.
Yeah.
I for one, hope it is.
Criminal. Imagine being the villain.
Imagine Wes McCauley has to go out to ice and go, "We have a good goal."
I mean,
look, Wes McCauley dreams of this.
Yeah, but also like as rivals, that is also a perfect opportunity for the Penguins to be the biggest villains of all time and shut out Ovi for the last goal.
I mean, the funny part is then it would give the NHL an excuse to they could make their pick for the first game of the season for next year to be the Capitals versus whoever the hell they want.
Yeah.
And it can be the opener.
Yeah.
And they can play it wherever they want. And all eyes on Ovechkin. But I think, look, he's got the Bruins and the Blackhawks. He's going to score. And the Sabres. He's going to score against those teams. And the rest of it's a bit trickier. He's got the Blue Jackets. He's got the Hurricanes a couple of times. He's got the Islanders a couple of times. And he finishes with the Penguins.
You couldn't do a lot better than that in terms of teams that have let in a lot of goals this season. You got a bunch of them there.
Like he scored today against the Jets, and the Jets don't concede to anybody. So, he's.
I mean, look, he can score on it. He can score on anyone. It's just really at this point in time whether it gets done in this next 11 games. Statistically,
I think he gets there. I think he gets there with games to spare.
Yeah, I think there's probably a good chance. Although, how fantastic would it be if it's the winning goal in the third period of the last game of the season?
I mean, that would be pretty good. But I also think there would be something to it because it's Ovi. Like he just goes on a tear and scores 4 against the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
That would be funny.
Very likely.
1, it's Chicago, but 2, it would just be funny. So that's going to do us for this episode. We're going to be back far more regularly We've been, obviously, as we said, there were other things going on, but those things are sort of not going on. So we'll be able to get back to a regular recording schedule almost.
Yeah, leading into the playoffs pretty soon. We're a couple of weeks off the start of the playoffs now. So we'll do a little bit of a playoff preview when that happens, and obviously, there'll be some pretty significant games to watch at that point in time. So, we're getting there. It's almost.
I'll have time because the Sharks won't be playing, so
yeah,
I won't have to watch. I can pick my brackets completely unencumbered by worrying about what my team's doing.
Yeah.
Which is, to be fair, I've been used to that for a little bit. All right, so we will be back far sooner than later, and we'll catch you all then.
Yeah.